Welcome to This Week in Hearing. I am Shari Eberts, and this is going to be a fun episode because we're going to be talking about the film Rall Caps. Many hearing loss movies focus on the capital D deaf experience, but Rall Caps is different. Its accurate portrayal of the hearing loss experience, including the use of hearing technology of all types rather than sign language, makes it a great film for educating the mainstream about hearing loss. How better to break down stigmas and generate conversation than by showing characters with hearing loss just living their everyday lives? And now the film is available on streaming platforms like Amazon and Apple TV. So today we welcome Jodi Cutler, the co-author of the book that inspired the film, and Lee Cipolla, the director of the film. So thank you both for being here, and congratulations on your beautiful film. It's very impactful.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Shari.
So let's get started with you, Jodi, as the writer. What inspired you to create Rall Caps? And then I want to hear from Lee on that one as well.
It's a very long story that has everything to do with my father and my son in terms of writing the book. My father came to me with a short story about him being hit by a baseball bat. So his part of that inspired the writing of the book. And as my son was diagnosed with profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss in Italy, I was working on helping him learn to listen and use spoken language. He immediately was fitted with hearing aids in Italy, and that started our journey. It was a long journey, and it was a difficult journey, but we had a lot of help. I met with from medical professionals, speech therapists, and friends in Italy. And there was a certain point where he was no longer getting benefit from his hearing aids for his specific type of hearing loss. So I looked into cochlear implants. He, at that point, was a cochlear implant candidate. So he received his first cochlear implant and was an outstanding recipient and did amazingly well with his cochlear implant to the point where he became more autonomous. And during that time, when I told my dad I had thought that his short story could be a good book, every time I spoke to my father, he would say, write the book. And I was trying to help my son learn to speak. So it wasn't really the greatest time in the world to do that until my son received the cochlear implant. And I realized when I was looking through literature, seeing if there was an opportunity for my son to see himself in literature, there had been no character in literature. So at that point, I said to my father, okay, I'm ready to write the book, but I want there to be a character just like Jordan so he can see himself represented in literature. And we went back and forth for like a year and a half writing this book by email until we managed to finish it. And I was able to thank the medical professionals that helped us, and my son was able to see himself in literature. And that is how the book was born.
That's incredible. And it's such an important thing for people to be able to see themselves in literature, on film, and you're just carrying that tradition on with the film. So it's wonderful. All right. So Lee, how did you get involved in this? What inspired you to say this would be a great movie?
Well, Stephen Cutler, Jodi's father, who was the co-writer, reached out to me back in 2008. And so this story spans over 12, 13, 14 years before we made the movie.
Wow.
Of that relationship and knowing about the book and him wanting to adapt it. And so there's a lot of ebbs and flows that changes over 12, 13 years, right? Not just with your own wants and purposes, but the industry and what the industry wants, right? So the answer that I always give, I guess what always attached me to this was, number one, I grew up watching The Sandlot, the 90s classic Disney movies with kids in baseball, and, stories that involved families of all ages, right? And so that was always a driving force. But when I picked up the book back in 2008, 2009, and then several years later when we kept in touch and we kept in touch and tried to pitch it to Disney and other, companies, and, didn't get anywhere in terms of the studio system, but we stayed in touch. But what always, I think that, I felt was fresh to the genre was the relationship between Jordy and Lucas, for all the reasons that Jodi just expanded on, with her son's story. And I just, Lucas is a very unique character, but also being a mentor figure to Jordy, where typically characters with disabilities are the ones that's their plight in the story. And it's always like a focus. And so here it's not. He's just a really talented baseball player and a mentor. And really his arc is about learning to become a leader, not about overcoming his disability. It's just a part of who he is, a trait. But also, Jordy's character with anxiety. So these are two kids that are overcoming adversity in unique ways, but how they connect, and them being a pitcher and a catcher. And then really the character-driven aspect of it, I felt like here we have a sort of a canvas to work with, where the backdrop is all these things that I've always wanted to do, kids and family and baseball and summer, but it's a character-driven film, so it's an independent movie set in that world. I think that was a really fresh perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's really, one of the things that I love about the film is that there's deaf and hard of hearing characters, like you said, but it's not what the film is about. And that's pretty special. That's pretty rare in the world of hearing loss films. So, it's a baseball movie first. But it really does a good job, I think, depicting real life experiences of living with hearing loss in an authentic way. And so how did you make sure, Jodi and Lee, that the people with hearing loss in the film were portrayed authentically and didn't become stereotypes or anything like that?
I think that having lived the experience with my son, I knew the ins and outs of hearing devices and auxiliaries and all of the opportunities we have nowadays, thanks to hearing technology, to live a typical life. So partnering with Phonak and Advanced Bionics, they gave us the opportunity to incorporate hearing technology in a natural way, so that it was so natural that it didn't take away from the story, and it gave our characters the opportunity to live their lives in an authentic way, the way they do every single day, without it being awkward or strange. And by having that type of representation, the authentic representation, the real hearing technology, the real deaf actors who wear the hearing technology, it was a natural opportunity to have representation in a mainstream film that only baseball can provide. And Lee does such an incredible, artistic, phenomenal job of editing and really seeing that character representation to make it seamless in the process. And I mean, I'll never forget my son when he went to school. It was very awkward for him to use an FM system. And the opportunity to have that type of character in the mainstream means that when a child with hearing loss goes to school, they can say, "Here's my Roger on," and the teacher will say, "Okay," and the kids won't ask a million questions because they'll know from that scene in the movie that the Roger on is used to help communication and facilitate the process of communication in noisy environments. And that is what the goal was. And Lee did an unbelievable job achieving that.
I love that. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually, is when he's, on the pitching mound and the catcher is listening to like the secrets that he's telling about his sister. And so hopefully it's a warning to the teachers too, that they have to turn it off, when they're going to have a private conversation.
You've lived that experience like my son did when his teacher went to the restroom and was having a conversation, and he could hear inside the classroom what was happening outside. So these are real situations that happen in everyday life. And finally, our kids are going to understand the inside joke, and then the other people will get it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I'll say that, Jodi's experiences in it being based on her own son and her being very well entrenched in that world. I adapted the screenplay from the book that they wrote. And so I already had a text that, that it was accurate in the text. So, my job was not to screw it up and, make it inaccurate. And if I did, Jodi and Stephen were right there reading every draft to make sure that it was accurate in terms of all of the intricacies of wearing a cochlear implant and some of the verbiage and all of that stuff. But to take it a step further, and I always, tell people that I don't want to sound cavalier in doing this, because I think that there's been a big movement in the industry to cast, people with disabilities playing roles of disabilities, because for many years it was, actors that didn't have disabilities pretending. And I'm just going to talk from a consumer point of view. It really annoyed me growing up, even though a lot of these actors were phenomenal. It took me out of the story to watch an actor pretending to be deaf or pretending to be blind, because I liken it to you don't fake knock on a door. If someone was sitting there like there was a door, an actor was, and they knocked 6 inches from it, or said they were eating pizza and didn't eat pizza, it would be ridiculous, right? So why is it different in this sense? So that's all just to say that when we started casting, we knew, and when I say we, this is myself, Jodi, and Stephen, and everyone involved. It was all of our sentiment to make sure. I mean, Lucas was going to be casted properly with an actor that had hearing loss, and there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think even if we were offered some incredible deal to go make this movie with a lot of resources and a lot of money, and to not do that, we would have held strong. I think everyone would agree to that. That's just one thing that we couldn't do. Now, that being said, it was difficult, and we sort of we got a casting director that reach out, because not only did we have to, did they actually have to have hearing loss, they also had to have talent as an actor and chops, but they also needed to play baseball. So those three, the triple threat in that way, it's not easy. And we did a pretty wide reach and didn't really land anyone. And then it came all the way back around to Stephen Cutler's relationship with Curtis Pride, and his kids happened to be in theater, happened to be the right age. I say his kids because his Noelle Pride plays Nikki in the movie, and she was Colton's sister, and they were both the right ages for those parts. And we started with Lucas. So it just, I think that obviously I it was the right time, right place, and we got super lucky. And we really, after casting Colton and meeting Nikki, I don't remember the order, but I'm pretty sure after we met Noelle, we wrote that into the sister character as well, because she's not deaf in the book. But I think that this was a collaboration, with me and Stephen and Jodi, and we were like, this is just a great opportunity to expand upon that, and why not? And so that's how it happened. So there was luck involved, but we also were very sure that we weren't going to cast someone that didn't have hearing loss.
Right. Well, it worked out great because they're very talented actors as well, right? So it was like a win-win-win. I'm glad you took the time to really get it right. That's wonderful. But what was it like to work on set, with deaf and hard of hearing actors? Was that something that was new to you, Lee? And so did you have to make any special accommodations, or, how did that process go?
Nothing really changed. Once in a while, if Noelle, I think she had her back turned, or something like that, when she wasn't looking at me directly or something like that, like a couple of times. But really, I only remember one instance where, I think we were shooting near the lake, and she had her back turned, and I was calling out, and someone was like, it reminded me, but really, other than that, there was nothing. I think it was just about, when, building the script and the story to make sure things were realistic in the way that they were portrayed on on paper. But it's just like working with any other actor. Nothing different. Yeah, I couldn't say that it changed any of the process. It's just like working with any other actor.
I experienced, in addition to what Lee said, I experienced a couple of situations because I was like basically a production assistant. The whole thing, I was running, getting water, studying everything, trying to work with the actors, the actresses, making the kids feel at home. And so I'm running around in a million different places and wardrobe and stuff. And there was a scene at the lake, like Lee was talking about. What happened was her battery died. Noelle's battery died. So we had to do a quick exchange of the battery. And I remember she felt pretty uncomfortable because she didn't feel like her voice was the same when she had her cochlear implant on and working and when the battery died. So her mom was on set and her mom helped her with the battery change. And then there was another scene when we were doing the movie night when the kids are all seated and they're showing Curtis Pride's history, which comes during the credits of the movie. So if anybody's watching it and you watch the movie, make sure you watch the credits because you're going to see a really good video about Curtis Pride. And there's a scene in there where Noelle looks at Carson and Carson looks at Noelle. And during the shooting of that scene, Carson was helping Noelle because there were a couple moments when it got dark and it was a little bit more difficult and there was noise and there was a little bit of craziness in that dynamic. And whenever there was a situation that Noelle was having difficulty, the other cast members really were sensitive to that and helped her out. So it was, for me, it was really refreshing to watch those moments because the kids, they really got along and loved each other and just had the best time on set. And that was a great part of the making of Rall Caps as well.
Well, and that shows with the power of education, right? Because the other children, other cast members maybe didn't know about hearing loss in this way or how to assist somebody with hearing loss when the filming began. But over the time, they learned how to do that and it happened just so naturally. And so that's, I would imagine, one thing that you're hoping will happen just for other children, right? In other situations that they can all learn from what they saw in this film. So I did want to ask you just about the impact, that you hope for this film that it's going to have on mainstream audiences. I think now, especially that it's on the streaming platforms. What is your hope that this film is going to achieve?
Well, I can say that one of the greatest parts of this is receiving the emails and the texts and the comments about what a difference it's already making in the lives of children with hearing loss. But not only that, people that we may know who have seen the movie, who write us saying, I had no idea the impact this movie was going to have. I have a friend who's a librarian and she's like our biggest fan. She's trying to get the book in all of the libraries and now she's trying to get the movie in all of the libraries. And so, so far it's just been an amazing feedback from people who get it, because I was really hoping they were going to get it and see the place and make the room. And because when we have movies like this, it generates conversation. And the only way to truly smash stigma is to generate that conversation. And this film is giving people the opportunity to do that.
Anything you want to add, Lee, on that?
Yeah, no, I'll just, second that. It's really exciting to see some of the reactions and the reflections of the movie from, complete strangers. We've got a few already that wear cochlear implants or have family members who do, and they were thankful to have a character and representation of it. And I think the goal is to normalize it, not just in movies, but in life. Having kids who have disabilities playing amongst kids who don't. Should be normalized, and hopefully this only supports that.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. So can you guys talk a little bit about the process getting the movie picked up on these streaming platforms? That's a great accomplishment for a film in general, right? But a film that is not about hearing loss but has hearing loss as a component of it. Was that more challenging, or what was that process like, and how did you finally push through any barriers that you faced?
I think in terms of distribution and everything, if anything, it helps. Which I don't know. I think that at least from a business perspective, distributors look at what the demographics are, and they're like, hey, this is the community, so it's great. It's just so in that sense, I think it's helped. And look, I just speaking on the nature of distribution right now, we're in a very strange place in entertainment in the movie world. I guess everyone will say that at any time. It's always crazy. But things are changing rapidly. And we finished the movie, around the time that the strikes were happening, and that delayed a lot of the process. Yeah, it's been a struggle, but when you get, a distributor who believes in it, and things have opened up in the industry again. We have found some, avenues we've seen the doors open a little bit. So, and now, as we speak now, yeah, like you said, we're, on Apple and Amazon, and it's out there. And so, yeah, I think that the beauty of where we're at now is that, anyone in the world can access a movie or content with a click of the button, and that's great. But now the challenge is really getting attention, for lack of a better term. It's showing that you exist and you're here, and people recognizing it and finding our film. So, we think it's going to be a slow rollout, but we're proud to be that. We're proud to be an underdog, the little engine that could, and just keep growing from here.
Amazing. Are there any future plans that you have in mind that you could talk about, or what's next for the film?
Well, all I can say is that we have been concentrating so hard for the past 4 years to just get it through distribution. And now that we've made it, I think we're all just pausing, taking a beat, and then getting creative. So we'll see what the future brings. But we do have definite goals, and we are moving in that direction of those goals. Because, for example, my story started in Italy, and Italy still can't watch it. So that is the next goal for me. Other than that, we're in the UK, we're in Australia, we're in Lee, where else are we? We're in a bunch of different countries, but I want to be in every single country.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slow rollout. So as Jodi said, it's been 4 years of just straight hustle for us. And then, we finally have had a chance to breathe now. We have some exciting announcements coming up in the future, so stay tuned. But I also, what my hope is that in addition to wherever it goes in distribution and how it's consumed by the world, I think it's a really good event movie in terms of Little Leagues getting together, all kinds of different organizations, and watching it together, because it's really, I'd like to think that it taps into all generations. There's representatives of every generation in the movie, as it is in the book. That's another thing that always attracted me, was the generation aspect to it, right? And you'll see that with Judd's character and Amy Smart's character, and then the main character. It's and even Rob, the older brother. It's like you add in a fourth generation there. So my hope is it's something that Little League organizations will want to watch, at events, and and whatever.
Cool.
So maybe it'll stand the test of time.
I love that. Well, and it deals with anxiety as well, which is something that a lot of younger children, unfortunately, can really identify as well. So I think there's so many avenues, so many opportunities. So I'm glad you're taking a little breather, but I can't imagine, knowing both of you, that it's going to be that long of a breather. I know you guys are very excited about getting this out into the world in every way possible. So.
There's also, in talking about anxiety, there's also Coach Ballgame, who basically plays himself in the movie, and he is someone who is bringing back the great way to coach kids and focusing on reducing anxiety and on parents having an intelligent approach to cheering their kids on. And one of the comments that he's made in our question and answer sessions is that this movie gives little boys a chance to express their emotions, which so often we try to shut down by saying, oh, you're fine, get over it. Instead, it really gives young boys a chance to have feelings. And this movie makes it okay. And it gives them the opportunity to talk it out and to ask for help, and to let all of the kids out there that help does exist when you ask for help. So that's another really important aspect of the movie that we want to make sure families are aware of, and to be able to use this movie as a tool to talk about the important situations that kids nowadays find themselves in.
Yeah, no, I love that. Do you have a discussion guide on your website or anything that people can use at home or when they're watching it with groups of people to guide a discussion about that?
No, but that's an outstanding idea. And one more thing for us to get our teeth into. So thank
I'm
you very
sorry.
much. No, that's
Yeah.
amazing that you're right. That's an incredible idea. We haven't even thought of that. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll look for that, because I think that would be really helpful for people, just to, not just to enjoy the movie, but to be able to talk about it and really learn all of these messages from it. So
I really appreciate you having us on your podcast, because I know all that you've been through, and you've also created a documentary, and you are have written a book, and so I really appreciate everything you've said about the movie, because I know that you've been through a lot of what we've been through. So thank you for having us.
thank you. No, I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it. I think it's wonderful to see just all the creativity that's happening around hearing loss. The more that we talk about it, the more that we normalize it, the better it's going to be for everyone. So I'm really very proud and pleased to have you guys to talk to today. So thank you both for being here, and I wish you lots of continued success with the movie. And if people watching want to learn more about it, they can go to rallycapsthemovie.com. So thank you so much. Great to see you guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Shari.